So yeah, thanks for joining again. So this is session number 8. So it's probably the last one for term 3, but if I can do a few more, we'll just carry on. There were some questions as well from students from last week, which I'm trying to catch up on those and just maybe answer quickly and then go into our topic for today. One of the questions was the understanding was that I worked very hard for reaching some kind of level of achievement, or whatever that person saw in me, thinking, some kind of enlightenment or self-realization. And when I thought about it, really it wasn't. It's not an achievement. So I thought I'd just talk about that just quickly. So when I was quite young in South America, I got to a point where I was really depressed, and everything was going bad, I guess you could say, and I wasn't happy in society, maybe to put it that way. And I felt like I didn't belong in society. There was something wrong, and honestly, I wanted to leave society in some way, or if I had to, I would do it myself by, committing suicide. So you're kind of thinking about those things as well. So it's something that I went through from being really depressed or looking at the world as a really negative, dark place. And then from there, the transformation of suddenly, was not sudden, but changing to, it's almost like winning lottery, where you're transformed in a way. But then I say lottery, but it's not, because lottery is something that is given to you and only few people can have it. So it's gifted to you. And enlightenment is not gifted to you. So that I think is an important thing to mention. It's just changing your mind about the way you see things. Anybody can do that. You can change your mind. Winning lotto is another thing. Not everybody can do it. Only few people can. But here we're talking about you changing your mind and seeing the world differently. In the beginning, you don't want nothing to do with it. You're trying to separate yourself from society. A lot of the monks do it as well. So that's a terrible thing to do, trying to get away from society. Because if you do that, you miss how beautiful really it is. So, but it's you looking at society, learning to really look at it, and then you can change. So, of course, the question will be for the students. The next question is, well, there will be other questions. You think, well, do they want to change? Like if I ask you, what do you prefer, enlightenment or changing your mind about the world and loving the world? You get to pick one or the other. It's a misunderstanding. People will probably go for, I want enlightenment. I don't want to like the world. Well, enlightenment is loving the world the way it is. If I had to pick, and I didn't know what enlightenment is, of course, now I would say, well, I don't need it. All I want is to see how beautiful the world is. So that is the transformation. But it's something that you just have to decide to do it and start to look at it a different way. So someone may ask, well, how do you change? So that could be the next question, but it's a question that's coming from the mind. Well, how can I change? Well, the question is asked by the ego again, by the mind. So that's the wrong question. You don't want to ask that question, how to change. So that leads to an important idea that I heard once, which is if you're going to think about light and darkness, we talked about this before, you may ask this question, which it might make sense to you, and you may ask, you want to bring, for example, you want to bring light into this room, into a dark room. So you sit in a dark room and you ask the question, when I bring light into the room, what am I going to do with the darkness? Where do I put it? Or where do I throw it? But it is a silly question, yeah? But it might look like you could ask, well, you're going to bring light into this room, then you have to do something with the darkness. But you don't, you just bring the light into the room. When you bring the light, you will see. There will be no question of darkness. And anything that belongs to the world of darkness will start to disappear when you bring the light into the room. And what we mean is basically awareness. You bring awareness into the room, and anything that belongs to the ego will start to disappear. You don't have to think about what to do and ask questions. That's the mind asking questions. So you just want to bring the light. You bring awareness to this moment. Consciousness, yeah, into this moment, we could say. So ego is unconsciousness, So ego is the darkness or judgment, all those kind of things, questions come from the mind. But when you bring awareness, when you bring light into the room, then there's no more questions. So we try to cover it in different ways for you. All right, so that was just trying to cover one of the questions that the student did ask. That will lead to what we're going to talk about as well today anyway, which is most of it is going to be about responsibility. I did ask you before, what is responsibility and what are you responsible for? And you've answered. And so we're trying to go deeper into that. And the way we talk about responsibility, it sounds like duty. Yeah, you have a duty, you have a responsibility. If I ask you, are you responsible? If I might say, take responsibility, those things, those are the ways that we talk about responsibility. But the idea that I want you to have is going to be totally different. It's nothing to do with that. That's the way society looks at responsibility. A master was asked once the question, are you a responsible person? And the master just laughed and said no. So we need to understand what he meant by that. So responsibility, just be open to look at what responsibility really means when it comes to this way that we talk, I guess, in philosophy. So we're going to start looking at the ego, the mind again. So the ego has an energy charge that you're not aware of. It's something that you're doing. So we call it as like the personality, persona. So you need to give it form. So you need to give your identity form, and that's how it lives. It could be living in a contraction or some kind of thought form, as Eckhart will call it sometimes. So this is important for the ego to have some kind of form. And the ego is very fussy, and it only enjoys certain things in life. there is the ego can't really enjoy many things. Sometimes you may have a day it didn't go so well, and you might say at the end, that was a day to forget. Have you ever heard about that? Have you thought of that before? So, the thought comes, so that was a day to forget. Why would we say such a thing? What do we mean by that when we say there was a day to forget? And just use this opportunity to write down on your piece of paper. This can be like your first question. To think about yourself. Have you said that before? And what do you mean that you said, there was a day to forget? Or today was a day to forget? If I think about my dad when he passed away, it's not something that I would say, well, that was a day to forget. On the contrary, that's a day to not to remember, but it's definitely not a day to forget. It's part of my experience. So maybe there's another word instead of saying, well, there was a day to forget. So we don't really enjoy the difficult days. But just imagine if you were okay with, bad days. When you're sick, it's okay. You can enjoy it. You're in bed. You don't have to work. So really, we should be acting all the time as if, everything is okay. But of course, if you are in the mind, you can't. If you think about maybe in my class when you were doing poi or when you were doing juggling, and let's say you had that was intense. Yeah, you did half an hour of juggling. Would you say, well, that's a day to forget? So not really. You'll probably say something else. So it just depends. You might say something like it happens all the time with the students that I have. I bring the juggling balls out, and then some students say, I don't like juggling. So, okay, so what do they mean they don't like juggling? Is it possible they don't like juggling, or really they mean something else? So if I go back to my experience in the past, when I was young, if I said, I don't like this, what I really meant was, I can't do it. And I remember with painting the same, I can paint, so I can dance, so I can whatever. It's really, you say I don't like it, you don't say I can't. You say I don't like it. So the next question for you is to do a bit of a research in yourself and have a look and ask yourself, when do you say that? Maybe you still say that, I don't like this. And then bring some awareness and notice that maybe you said, oh, I'm still saying I don't like this and that, but you just can't do it. Or you don't have time for it. It's too hard. So, okay, just say it's too hard maybe, but don't say I don't like it. So that could be a question again. Second question is just write down whatever you don't have to send it to me again. It's more as exploration for yourself to see, why you say, oh, I don't like to do this. So if we look at the ego again, we talked about the ego is trying to It's kind of an energy charge. It's got a bit of a momentum as well. It's pretty quick. You could say that as well about the ego. You cannot see what is happening or what you're doing. Your habits, and your way of thinking is very quick. So you cannot see what is happening. Now, there's also another reason why you cannot see what is happening in the way you behave, which is also related to because you cannot accept it in some way. So if you cannot accept something, what we do is we react. It's a reaction. So if you're stuck in traffic, for example, the moment that you're stuck in traffic, your reaction is to, complain, maybe to swear. But there's a lot of other steps that come in between what you just saw of the traffic being a nightmare and suddenly your comment. There are a few things that you're not watching. It just happens very quickly. So that's what we call as a reaction. So a reaction it's really that it's something that is instant. It's immediate. It implies also a rehearsal. So a reaction means it is already done before. So every time someone, cuts you off, you give them the finger. When this happens, you do that. You punch them, whatever you do. So we like to kind of have an answer for everything. Now, if you have a negative reaction is, we call it, it's, the discomfort is psychological, yeah? So it means that your mind is there. So if you have a negative reaction, it's a psychological reaction. Because if you're stuck in traffic, for your body, it's fine. You're just sitting down, relaxing. But the mind just can't handle it. So we call it psychological. So we say, I don't like this traffic, It's bad for me to do something that I can't do because it destroys my confidence, for the ego. So if you think about when you were young or a child as well, the kids, if you stay too long and you can't do something, then the ego will just really feel bad. And it feels like you need to strengthen the ego. So we get this really bad misunderstanding, or we go into this mistake that we think in life we have to strengthen ourselves, but really we're strengthening the ego. We don't understand what strength is. But if you could understand the traffic, then there is no problem with the traffic. It doesn't become a discomfort in that sense. There's no reactivity. And then you have the opposite of reactivity or reacting, which is, we call it a response or an awareness. But if you cannot accept something, then it means that you are doing something with your mind, which is like complaining and judging or fighting. And then we need to be aware when we're doing that all the time. Just be aware when you suddenly, you feel like you're fighting something. You just notice in your body language, you could be moving or already impatient. Somehow complaining in your mind. So with Tai Chi, we're trying to do things differently here. Kind of, you're trying to quit being you, or the old you, which is limited. So this is what we mean by trying to be present. There is a power in presence, in being present, in the present moment. And the power is that, we talked about it, is that when you're present, there's also is presence plus information. Some kind of information, awareness, some kind of light is coming to you. When the light comes, as we said before, then anything that's related to darkness and fear, ignorance, just disappears. So we want to practice as much as we can being present. But if you're in your mind, the mind only works with what it knows. It doesn't go outside that experience. So it's very limited. It's just the same square or comfort zone for the mind. So the mind has got its own way. So if you're always in your mind, you're going to be, as we said, reacting. There's going to be a lot of planning, a lot of rehearsal. So it's working with what it knows, with what it learned before, so then it can do it again and repeat it again. So you're like a parrot. You just the same techniques all the time, and it's not going to work. So instead of reacting, we said we want to try this new one. And this new way is not reaction, but we call it to respond, to act out of the unknown. So that's weird, but you're acting out of the unknown, out of the present moment. So you want to respond instead of react. So to respond is a skill or the ability. So responsibility, if you put the words around, is the ability to respond. And you can only do that in the present moment. You're not responsible tomorrow, or you weren't responsible in the past. We're talking about something else. We're talking about your ability to respond to the present moment and not to react, not to go into what you know. So it's a different approach. So you need to watch. You need to watch what's going on. So it's an ability of looking, which we call it, in India they call it the third eye, is you're looking with the third eye instead of with the old eyes of reacting and mind. If you have any questions, I'll just give you a minute just to ponder on that or think. So another question I can ask you, you can write it down, is, first you can write this phrase, what you practice grows stronger. It's something that I've been bringing up just subtle in the different classes. So what you practice will grow stronger. So what are you practicing? So the question is, are you practicing judgment, impatience, frustration? So if you are practicing those things will get stronger. That's what you're practicing all the time, complaining and frustration. So it kind of shapes your brain. Because your brain will kind of respond to a repeated practice, whatever you're doing. We talked about neuroplasticity. So if you're always judging and you're always impatient and frustrated, you're actually strengthening those pathways. So you become very good at being frustrated and very good at complaining and really good at being impatient. It gets worse and worse. So you need to wake up at some point, and whatever level we are at, and try to, this is for anybody, so myself included, is to be aware of those moments where it just sneaks in there. There's a little bit of frustration or a little bit of impatience and something. I'll give you another question for you to explore. You can, of course, look in dictionaries and then come up with your own idea. What is the difference between suppression and repression? So to repress or to suppress. So what is the difference between suppression and repression? In some way, there are psychological attempts to direct something or to control. It's like a defense mechanism, something that you cannot accept at the moment. You can't deal with it. So just explore those two words and see what you think. And we know that Sigmund Freud used to talk about the importance of to remember the past, try to get it out, don't suppress things or repress things. And then you realize how hard it is that everybody's hiding something. But he went the Western approach. So we a little bit different. This is really kind of easier. We're talking about awareness. So awareness is still something that needs to be explained. I'm not there yet. It will take some time, so it could be another session. At the moment, we have, I think it's 10 minutes left, looking at the clock. So I'll just carry on a little bit more. When it comes to an important word when we think about awareness, is the word responsibility. We are afraid to take responsibility. A lot of people are afraid. But that's because very early on in childhood, you've been actually taught really not to be responsible. They don't teach you that, but you are taught to be dependent, which is different. So it is quite different, really. And then when we are taught about responsibility, we are taught as you need to be responsible for your parents, you need to be responsible for your kids, for your country, anything like that. So that is not what I want you to look at responsibility. So instead, if you think about your father taking your responsibility for learning and for your education, you might say the priest is taking away that, you could say the same. He's taking away your responsibility for learning. He's actually teaching you about your spiritual growth. So he's responsible for your spiritual growth. Just like the doctor's responsible for your health. And we start to believe in those things. So of course, then when we grow up, this fear arises because we haven't been trained to be responsible for ourselves. So in the Catholic Church as well, I remember you go to the priest to confess. And you can go to a psychologist where he looks at you. But you never really were taught how to look at yourself. So when you lose responsibility, you're actually losing another very important word, which is freedom. Because freedom and responsibility go together. So if you lose freedom, you lose responsibility. If you have responsibility, you have freedom. So that's the importance why we need to look at this and maybe take it deeper. So this is strategy in society to control you, to remove this freedom. So society tells you you've committed a sin. Then society teaches you how to feel guilty. And then it teaches you to go to a priest to confess. So the priest can pray for you, and he will talk to God for you. So it's something that was so simple as being become so complicated and unnecessary. If we could just teach kids at the beginning how and to understand what responsibility is. So it's more than that. So let's say whatever you do, whatever you want to do it, right? I mean, who's going to be the judge of what you've done? You know, what is sin and what is not sin? And how much sin have you committed? Is it, is it a big sin? Is it 1 kilo, 2 kilos, or 1 meter? How are you going to measure it? Who's going to be the judge to measure your, what you've done? And who is this priest or this person, a stranger, who's going to, see you and you have to confess? And then your priest is going to know all the things you've done. He's going to know your mind and he can control you in a way. So there's like a strategy, if you think about it, of, you are dependent. So now now it's too late. Now you're stuck into this system, like a sheep, and you just have to follow. You're stuck in the crowd and you don't have a freedom and you don't have responsibility. You can blame somebody else for things that are happening. So here we're trying to say, to understand what it is to be responsible for yourself. So really, I would say just go and do whatever you want. So don't misunderstand this, but do whatever you want. And then, if you do something wrong, you will know that is wrong. The punishment will be there. You will feel it. If you do something that is right, you will know there's some kind of reward. That's how you should really learn, without people judging you, really. So you develop a sensitivity of what is right and wrong, which is awareness. Yeah, we talked about. You develop this awareness, this third eye. This is what I mentioned to you in class when I shot the bird. I wanted to shoot a bird, and I was quite young. And my dad said, "Why you want to shoot a bird?" I said, "I just want a rifle. I want to shoot a bird." So he said to me, "Yeah, that's okay. Go for it. You can shoot all the birds you want, but just make sure that you do it with awareness." So luckily, I kind of understood, but I thought, well, whatever. So I just went and shot the bird. I was quite excited up to the moment I shot the bird and I saw him dying and falling. But I did it with awareness. And then I knew if it was right or wrong instantly. And as I said, it changed a lot of things in me. I haven't had a bird or chicken since then. So I became vegetarian in a way. And not because I felt guilty. I just felt like there is another way. So we need to learn by our experiences rather than someone else telling you what's right or wrong. So cause and effect come together. You just have to be really present. All right, I think we only have a minute left. So I know there will be still a lot of questions because I'm not there yet. What I want to talk about responsibility. So hopefully we can actually finish it next week. Yeah. So you can see how responsibility is actually awareness would be important. All right. So what I'll do is I will log off. Thank you for joining. And I will send another link just to give you 5 minutes if you want to ask anything. And then we're going to go through the Shibashi by the second set, just to do some exercises. All right. Thank you so much. There may be another couple of questions. I'll just send them to you later. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.